So we're going to look at some problems in chapter 2.1, actually just one problem, and we're going to show you how to do a bar and pie graph by hand. So we'll go to that next. So this is problem number 32 in your textbook on page 48. The following table presents the number of global shipments of smartphones for several vendors in 2012. Attached is the frequency graph, the frequency table of those shipments. So what you see in the book was the vendor. This is the category that the vendor is a label, obviously, so it's a qualitative variable. And the shipments essentially are the frequency of shipments, and they're in millions. And then we've calculated a relative frequency, and we'll go into that in just a second. We're going to construct a frequency bar graph, and then we're going to construct the relative frequency distribution. The relative frequency distribution is, in fact, that column of the frequency table. And then we're going to construct a relative frequency bar graph and construct a pie chart as well. So let's talk a little bit about this table, this frequency table that we already have constructed. And we don't have the whole entire data set, so what we have instead is a frequency table, which sometimes happens. We can create the relative frequency by dividing the frequency by the total. So this number here is 213 divided by 700.1. Likewise, we would want to round up to 3 decimal places. This particular number is 35 divided by 700.1. And when we round up, we actually get about 5.05. And if we multiply it by 100 to get a percent, we would have 5%. So now we're going to construct a frequency bar graph for the data set. To do this, the x variable is just going to be my vendors. And that's going to be on the x-axis. The y variable is equal to shipments in millions. So we want to look at our scales for both the y-axis and the x-axis. Well, the x-axis is simple. It's going to be Samsung, Nokia, just these values here, not the total, but these values. The shipments, on the other hand, we have to look at, so for the y variable, we look at the minimum value and maximum values to establish the scale. In this case, the maximum value, the minimum value equals 35 million, and the maximum is 316.3. So our scale has to encompass the minimum and the maximum value for the y value. So now we're going to go to create the bar graph. So in constructing the bar graph, we draw a line, not a very good line, I might say. By hand, we try to make it as nice as possible. It's hard to do this on the computer by hand, but we're trying. So on the X side, this is Samsung. I'll put Sam. I'll put Nokia. I'll put Apple. And I'll put others. So that's the X is equal vendor. On the Y side, I know I have to put in different values for the minimum and the maximum values for my bar chart. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Let's make it 10 at least. Maybe I have to go further than that. Let's see. We'll do this as 50, 100, 150. Let's do this as 200, 250, 300, and 350. I made it on that side, and I need to put this as shipments. I need to mark this as shipments and millions. Right. So now we're going to draw our bar graphs. We'll go ahead with Samsung. It's 213. So I come up here to about 213 and I draw my first bar graph. And there it is. And I'll do Nokia at 35, which is about right here. Maybe a little smaller than that. We're eyeballing this, of course, and again, it's hard to do this on the computer. Apple, we'll go ahead and do Apple at 135. Apple is at 135. There it is. And then the others was 316, so it goes up to here about. My picture is very, very bad, isn't it? So there is the bar graph for frequency. This is by shipments. If I wanted it to be based on relative frequency of shipments, I would have to change the Y graph to percentages, but my graph would look pretty much the same. So now the question is how do I create a pie chart? So we'll construct the pie chart. The first thing we're going to do is we looked at the relative frequencies and the percentages based on those relative frequencies by multiplying it by 100. Samsung was at 30.4%, Nokia was at 5%, Apple is at 19.4%, and the others was 45.2%. Not a lot of information on this chart, but let's go ahead and first of all we'll draw a circle. Normally we would use a protractor, but in some cases that won't work very well for us because we don't have one. So what do? Well, typically I put in dotted marks initially, and we'll erase them as time goes on. But these are now, I've divided the circle into 4 pieces, which is at 25%. And so now I will mark off various degrees based on that information. So I'll start with Samsung. It's 30%, so I'll draw this solid line in for sure. And then I have to get about 5% out of here, which is about like that. So that's about 30.4%. That's the best I can do, right? And so this portion is Samsung. And it's 30.4%. So I'll just go ahead and put that in. I want to be able to erase some of the lines. Oops, I kind of did that wrong, but I tried to erase something here. Let me see if I can draw back. Samsung. There we go. How's that? Okay, and now we'll do Nokia. It's 5%. Well, 5%. So this area here is about 20%. So I know I have Apple at about 20%, or pretty close to it. So this area here almost can be Apple. And it's at 19.4%. Right. And then finally, Nokia is at 5%, so it's going to be about like this here. So I might put Nokia there at 5%. And then finally, I'm going to erase this line here. Well, let me see if I can erase it. Well, it's not letting me erase. I don't know why. Huh. Well, all right. We'll go ahead and put the last piece together here. And this is others. Oops. Wrong thing here. Well, this I can color this. How about that, huh? So this is the other portion, right? And let me put in the other. And it's at 45.2%. So there's our pie chart. The last question that was asked is, what is the proportion of shipments in 2012 were for Samsung? Well, this is for 2012, right? The proportion is just the relative frequency times 100%, which in this case for Samsung is 30.4%. So that concludes this particular problem.